Morning came softly to the stone walls of the prison, as if the sun itself was afraid to look too closely at what waited inside. The light slipped through a narrow window high above the floor and rested on cold stone, pale and quiet. It did not reach the woman sitting on the low wooden chair. She remained in shadow, wrapped in a thin gray dress that once might have been white. The silence around her felt heavy, like air before a storm, yet nothing moved. This was how most days began now. Slowly. Gently. Almost kindly, if one ignored the truth beneath it. Marie Antoinette had learned to measure time by sounds instead of clocks. The distant scrape of boots in the corridor told her when guards changed. The slow drip of water somewhere behind the wall marked the hours. Even her own breath had become a way of counting, steady and careful, because any rush of feeling made it harder to breathe in this place. She sat straight, hands folded, eyes lowered. She had learned that posture mattered, even now. Especially now. Once, she had awakened to silk curtains and the quiet steps of servants. Once, her mornings had smelled of wax and flowers and warm bread. Those memories came uninvited, like ghosts that refused to leave. She did not chase them away. She let them pass through her, knowing they would fade on their own. Everything faded now. The prison was not loud. That was what surprised her most when she was first brought here. She had expected shouting, chains, screams. Instead, there was order. Calm. Rules spoken in flat voices. The terror did not come from noise but from the absence of it. From the way life continued outside these walls while time inside seemed to slow, stretch, and thin. Marie Antoinette had been called many things in her life. Queen. Foreigner. Monster. She had worn each name like a borrowed coat, never quite fitting. Now, here, she was simply a prisoner. A body to be watched. A name written in ink on a paper that would soon be crossed out. The guards entered without warning. They never knocked. There was no need for politeness. Two men, faces blank, movements practiced. One carried a small tray. The other held a folded paper. Marie Antoinette rose from her chair, smoothing her dress by habit. She waited. The tray held bread and water. The bread was hard, the crust cracked. She took it with quiet thanks that went unanswered. The paper was placed on the table. She did not reach for it until the guard stepped back. It was another notice. Another list of rules. Another reminder that her life no longer belonged to her. She read slowly, lips barely moving. No visitors. No letters. No personal items. Sleep at set hours. Rise when ordered. Speak only when spoken to. These were not new. They were repeated often, as if repetition could erase the past. As if enough rules could make her forget who she had been. When the guards left, the door closed with a soft final sound. Marie Antoinette sat again. She did not eat right away. She stared at the bread, remembering tables heavy with food, laughter echoing through long halls. She remembered choosing cakes she barely tasted, distracted by voices and music. The memory did not bring pleasure. It brought distance. Like looking at a life that belonged to someone else. What they were doing to her was not loud. It was not violent in the way stories like to tell. There were no whips, no blood. Instead, there was waiting. There was stripping away. Each day, something small was taken. First her jewels. Then her clothes. Then her servants. Then her name, spoken now only with bitterness. They made her walk through corridors where people stared without speaking. They made her stand for hours while papers were read aloud, listing crimes that sounded strange even to her own ears. They spoke of hunger, of anger, of betrayal. They spoke as if she were an idea, not a person. She listened because she had no choice. At night, when sleep came, it was light and broken. Dreams brought faces she could no longer touch. Her children. Her husband. Voices calling her name in ways she barely remembered. She woke often, heart racing, unsure where she was until the stone walls reminded her. The fear did not come from the thought of death. That fear had already passed through her like a wave and left her empty. What frightened her was the slow loss of self. The way her thoughts grew smaller. The way her world narrowed to stone and rules and silence. This was the horror no one spoke of. The unmaking. Marie Antoinette pressed her hands together and closed her eyes. She breathed. She remembered how to sit still. How to endure. Outside, the city moved. Inside, time waited with her. Days passed, though they felt the same. The light shifted slightly on the wall, marking seasons she could not see. Sometimes voices echoed from far away, rising and falling like waves against a shore she no longer stood on. Marie Antoinette listened without trying to understand the words. Understanding only led to pain. The guards changed again. New faces, same eyes. Some looked at her with anger. Others with curiosity. A few with something like pity, though they hid it quickly. Pity was dangerous. It could be mistaken for weakness. One afternoon, she was told to prepare. No explanation followed. Preparation now meant very little. She washed her face with cold water. She smoothed her hair as best she could. There were no mirrors. She imagined her reflection from memory, then let it go. That woman was gone. They led her through a longer corridor this time, into a room she had not seen before. It was brighter. Windows lined one wall. A table stood in the center, surrounded by chairs. Papers waited there, neatly stacked. Men stood beside them, already seated, already judging. She was told to sit. She did. The questioning began calmly. Voices measured. Words chosen carefully. They asked about money, about letters, about conversations she barely remembered. They asked as if the answers mattered, though the outcome was already decided. Marie Antoinette answered slowly, choosing honesty not because she believed it would save her, but because it was all she had left. Hours passed. Her throat grew dry. Her back ached. Still, they continued. Each question peeled away another layer. Not of guilt, but of dignity. They spoke of her children. Of her marriage. Of private moments turned into public accusations. This was where the true cruelty lived. In forcing her to hear her life twisted into something unrecognizable. She did not cry. Tears would have been easy. Instead, she held herself still. She spoke when told. She remained silent when interrupted. She learned to exist in the space between questions. When it ended, there was no announcement. No conclusion. She was simply led back to her cell. That night, sleep did not come. Her mind replayed voices, phrases, accusations. Not because she believed them, but because repetition had power. She worried that if she heard them enough, they might begin to sound true. This was another part of what they were doing. Not breaking her body, but bending her thoughts. Making her doubt her own memories. Making her question her own worth. In the days that followed, she was allowed less movement. The walks grew shorter. The light felt farther away. The silence deepened. It wrapped around her like a second skin. Marie Antoinette began to speak to herself quietly, just to hear a human voice. She recited prayers she remembered from childhood. She named objects in the room. Chair. Wall. Floor. Window. She reminded herself that language still belonged to her. Sometimes she imagined the crowd outside. The faces. The anger. She wondered if any of them remembered her as a person. Or if she had become only a symbol, shaped to fit their fear and rage. What frightened her most was how calm she felt. Not peaceful, but distant. As if she were already stepping away from the world. She worried that when the final moment came, she would feel nothing at all. Yet even in this quiet horror, something remained. A small, stubborn sense of self. A memory of kindness. A belief that suffering did not erase humanity, even when it tried. She held onto that belief as the days moved closer to their end. The announcement came without ceremony. A guard read it aloud, voice flat, eyes fixed on the paper. Marie Antoinette listened, heart steady. She had known this moment would arrive. Still, hearing it spoken made the air feel heavier. She was given instructions. What to wear. When to rise. How to walk. Even now, control mattered. Especially now. That night, she was allowed to sit by the window longer than usual. The sky beyond was pale, streaked with soft color. She watched birds cross it, free and unaware. She wondered what it felt like to move without permission. Memories came again, gentler this time. Her mother's voice. A garden in spring. The sound of laughter before it became dangerous. She let herself feel these things fully, knowing there would be no time later. In the morning, she dressed slowly. Each movement felt deliberate. Sacred, almost. The guards waited. She did not rush. As they led her out, she noticed how quiet her thoughts had become. Fear no longer shouted. It whispered, distant and tired. In its place was a strange clarity. An understanding that what they had done to her was not only about death. It was about erasure. About turning a life into a lesson. But she refused to disappear completely. With each step, she reminded herself of her name. Marie Antoinette. She carried it like a final possession. The walk was long. The crowd waited. She heard them before she saw them. A low sound, like wind through trees. Faces blurred together. She focused on the ground, on the rhythm of her steps. This was the last act of their horror. To make her visible again only at the end. To return her to the world as something to be consumed. She stood. She waited. She breathed. In the final moments, time stretched once more. Marie Antoinette felt the weight of every gaze, every judgment. Yet within her, there was stillness. Not surrender, but acceptance. She thought of the quiet mornings in her cell. Of the light that never quite reached her. Of the silence that taught her how to listen inward. They had taken much from her. Comfort. Privacy. Voice. But they had not taken her awareness. They had not taken her ability to feel. As she looked out, she did not see enemies. She saw people. Afraid, angry, hopeful, broken. She understood, perhaps for the first time, how fear could turn into cruelty without anyone noticing. This was the true horror. Not the blade. Not the end. But the slow, careful stripping away of humanity that came before. The way suffering was made ordinary. The way silence was used as a weapon. Marie Antoinette closed her eyes. She took one last breath, deep and steady. In that breath, she held everything she had been. Everything she had lost. Everything that still mattered. And then, finally, the waiting ended. The world moved on. History wrote its lines. But the quiet suffering, the days of silence, the slow unmaking, remained hidden between the words. That was what they did to her before the end. That was the part few remembered. And in remembering it now, gently and honestly, something human was restored.